Sometime in my immediate past, there was a fire in a collection, and this is one of the things that popped out of that fire. This is a Walther P38. As close as I can tell, it was made in 1943, and this thing is glued together by melted on grips. It's nasty. I'll tell you, I'm pretty sure it's empty. But that's about all I know about it. We can't even caulk it or get it apart. This rabbit hole is going to be about dynamiting a P38 apart and seeing if there's anything grossly wrong with it, and maybe putting some of the best repop grips I have ever seen in my life on this thing. And hell, maybe we'll even shoot it. Down the rabbit hole, boys and girls. Well, there's a couple of things we got to find out. Bruno's over doing some research right now. We're making sure that this is not Lawrence of Arabia's P38. There's always that concern that you want to make sure that it didn't belong to a famous individual. Who knows? I'm guessing step one is going to be to unglue this mag and try to get this mag out. And in it, the mag is really glued in there. So what I'm thinking about, we're going to wind up putting a pin through it and tapping on it with the benefit of a little bit of heat. I think we're just going to warm this plastic up, and we're going to see if we, oh, wait a minute, we may not need to warm it up. Yep. Oil wasn't going to get this because this isn't rusted in. It's, oh, here, let me see if I can show you what I'm talking about. There is plastic melted on this thing everywhere, and it's what's left of the grips. See that right there? That's plastic. I'm not even down to the metal yet. I don't want to scratch it if I can get away with it. But it's, this thing's pretty horked up. We'll see what we can do with it. I think that some of those white spots have something to do with some of that firefighting reagent. The acid in it, it's got phosphoric acid in it, and I think it ate right through the bluing, and then it parkerized the thing. Okay, so this answers the next question I had, which is there any ammo in it? And there isn't. And this mag spring is pretty thin. It might have been compromised. We'll see. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about the plastic. Right there. You can see that. Just scrubbing off. It's in puddles on the side of this thing. It's in puddles. Well, we got that out. That's a good thing. And now we can see whether or not we got any mag spring tension. I don't know. Okay, so to take this thing apart, I'm guessing that plunger goes down and then this should slide backwards. Hang on a minute. I'm trying to get this angle right here. All right, I got that plunger popped down there. And then that should come off. Wow. These fire guns are always just a lot of fun. What I want to do is get this follower pushed down so that we can just prise the bottom off of this. Oh my God, he's beating on this priceless work of art. No, I'm not. I'm trying to dynamite a freaking gun that's been in a fire to pieces here, and don't just spare me. Spare me. We got to get all that out. All right. So this spring has been compromised. It got hot right down at the bottom. Drawing a temper on something this thin is not hard in a localized sense. It does not take a tremendous amount of heat to do that. That's leading us to our next problem, which is we can't cock this hammer. And I don't know what's going on inside the fire control mechanism that's keeping us from being able to fire this. Again, the gun's been deranged. We don't know. Well, until we can get the hammer to full cock, we can't get the slide off of this thing. So what I've elected to do here is attempt, and I'm bending around all right. So what I'm doing is I'm knocking out this hammer pin right here. Let me get that lit right. There we go. So what I'm attempting to do is knock that pin out. Now, don't just jerk this assembly pin back out again, because you don't know what might come flying out of this gun. In this case, we're rattling that pin and we're feeling that there's nothing moving there, so we can take that out and maybe we can get lucky and extricate the hammer from this. We may not be able to. We don't know that yet. And again, this may not be a standard method for taking this thing apart, but there are pieces of this hammer that I don't want to break. There's a little toe on it. I'll show you later here. Yeah, I may not get this lucky. I may not be able to pull this out. Nope. Nope. I have loosened the hammer up, but there is not a geometry that allows me to extract the hammer to the rear, which is really what I'm looking for, because once that's out of the way, we can take the slide off this thing and attack whatever's horked up on the inside from the top. So having said that, all the standard connect disconnect stuff is on this side right here. And there's a lot going on. I would love to have this transfer bar here out of the way, and that's what would allow the hammer to come up. But in this case, I don't see us maybe getting that lucky. Maybe if I come all the way up, that will pop down over the top and allow me to get the hammer all the way back, which may allow us to get the slide most of the way back. Now there's a disconnect lever on the other side. We'll drop that down and maybe we can pull all this apart. So far, so good. Brass hammer, and I'm just love tapping it. We got the barrel and the lock out of it, and we got the slide off the top of it with a little bit of light massage. Again, inspection of this thing reveals just baked on grip. I mean, this is, I don't know how well this is showing up, but all this right here is just baked on. But now that we've got access to the top of the action, that's going to allow us to very, very carefully take this thing back apart. This is the piece right here that I was going out of my way to not break off. Now, that, I believe, is supposed to be spring-loaded. That's the same part that you find on a Smith & Wesson. That's the double-action pawl right there. And I don't want to make that, and I'm sure as hell not going to be allowed to go buy that. So we've succeeded in doing all of this without breaking anything yet. So best I can tell, this is all captured, and in order to not bend stuff, you pull this spring back like that. You remove the plunger like that, and then the spring comes out the front. And it does that without bending or breaking anything. But it's definitely captured, which when you look at this from a military standpoint, makes a lot of sense. Now the rest of this, I am going to take a photograph of how all this goes together. And the modern cell phone camera really makes short work of not screwing yourself. There we go. That's just so that I remember where springs go for future use, everything like that. The rest of this It's just a matter of knocking it all apart. There's a lot of interesting crap going on in here. This was one we figured out where you have to prise this up and forward. That comes off, and there's all kinds of wondrous stuff in there. There are plungers, and there are springs, and there are all kinds of stuff. So again, a magnificent place to take a photograph just to save your butt later on. You pick that up there and look down inside of it. I take pictures of everything. Back in the day when I was learning how to do this, and can you hold that a little closer to the phone, was actually a funny joke. We used to have to make drawings of this stuff by hand. We would actually draw it. Let's see here. What is that? Oh, that's the firing pin spring there. Okay, so I'm guessing we have to take out this plunger here. That's some kind of firing safety plunger. And then, let's see here. I need a significantly finer pair of pliers for this. And we'll just remove everything. Now, Bruno and I stopped here for a little bit and actually got in a bulk/website. And just remember to look it up before you frick it up. There's two things in this view that I want to show you. One is this spring right here, and this is the spring that lifts basically the disconnector, the transfer bar. And I've left this on because these springs are wound around these posts, and you're supposed to open them up, unflex them, and pop them off. This spring is fighting me, and it still works, and I'm going to leave it there and work around it. The other thing I want to show you in this view is right here. This gack. This is plastic that has been smeared all over this, and I'm not entirely positive how I want to get this off. This is a pretty sharp chisel. Yeah, that might be how we're going to take it off the rest of the gun, because I don't have to take burned on plastic off of guns too much. So we'll boil this first, and this should get everything nice and soft. And then you can see there where it's starting to come off here, and we're doing this without marking up the frame. Maybe even bring in a chisel. I just don't want to scratch the metal, and maybe we'll get lucky and we can get down to the bottom of this. So you see what we're fighting. This is what was gluing that fire control group together. So while I know I didn't take the gun apart in the right sequence, when you're dealing with deranged equipment, you are off sheet music, and you're taking on a great deal of liability when you do it, because when I'm all done, I got to certify this gun as being allowed to run again. And once I roll the fingerprint on it, I own it. Anyway, you can see here just how much of this crap is coming off this thing. Yikes. All right. Well, here it is. This is the simplified version of the Luger. Yeah, okay. Well, we've got all the pieces laid out on this magazine, frame, trigger transfer bar. This is actually what actuates the sear. That's the safety magazine release, the slide. And I got to tell you, man, there's a lot going on down inside this slide. There's a lot of milling going on in here. All of this up here is what's inside the slide. Hammer, recoil, springs, barrel, lock. It's all here, but is it? I submit to you that it is not all here. We have grips for this, which are repop. Here, let me rearrange this a little bit. I don't know what's in and what's out. These grips are really, really nice. They've got all the manufacturer's marks on the inside of them. There's a hammer strut missing. The hammer strut pushes up on the bottom of the hammer, kind of like this. It's, let me think, yeah, it's like that. So the hammer strut goes up in there, and it's shoving up on the bottom of the hammer. The hammer spring was missing. Everything that was in the back end of the gun was missing. That's the grip screw. And the last thing that was missing comes out of the bottom of the frame down here. And this is the magazine catch. And I have a funny feeling that somebody before me tried to take this gun apart. They got all this stuff out of the way from the melted mass. And then wherever they put their parts, they put their parts. Let's get this thing in a tub and boil it and see if we can't get at least the gratuitous gack off of the bottom of it. All right, we've come out of the first conversion process, and it did not take any of the, it did not help lift any of the plastics. So all the plastic's going to have to be hand lifted with the scraper very carefully. And then we're going to have to convert one more time to get at the metal that was under the plastic. Now, the metal that was under the plastic, or not under the plastic, I'm sorry, the stuff that just got regularly converted is coming out pretty well. This gun had a nice finish on it. Bearing in mind that as we boiled this in water, the finish you're going to see on this gun is the original finish. We didn't take anything off. We didn't take the gun down to white. No chemicals were used in this case. We're just giving it a good boiling and turning the active rust into back into a dead oxide, which just happens to be a dark blue. If that dead oxide was pink, well, then we would just call it pinking, wouldn't we? Okay, the conservation got the mung off, but it didn't get the deep plastic off. So I'm going to have to go back through and hand scrape all of this, and I'm trying to be really delicate so that I don't scuzz up the finish underneath it. This is nasty, I gotta tell you what. So we're just being really, really gentle here. And going back through and getting all this off without, you know, stacking up the frame. That's there. This stuff is on everything too. I mean, it's, wow. It's on everything. It was on a slide. Yeah, not so much on a slide. It's cleaning up nice. I mean, this finish cleaned up nice where the plastic wasn't. But man, where it is all over everything. Anyway, this is some of the boring parts of gunsmithing. It's monotony, but it's got to be done. And yeah. All right. So, et cetera, ad infinitum, ad nauseum. We'll just keep going until we get what we need pulled off of this. And then we'll put it all back in the tub. We'll take that tub and we'll put it back in the water, and we will redo it again so that the metal that was underneath the plastic comes out nice and clean. So one of the things we noticed was this bypassing sear here that gives you the double action ability. That's supposed to be spring loaded, and it's obviously not. It's been boiled, it's been lubricated, it's been angel pissed, it's been a lot of things. So I want to knock this pin out. You know, I got my finger in front of it because I don't want it to shoot across the room. Yeah, I got to come up just a little bit in the vise here. Come up just a little bit and get my attack angle right. Okay, that popped out. Bruno had his hands there. You didn't see that, but this isn't all that munged up. But this spring is absolutely destroyed. Let me get this out and I'll show you. And I didn't do this. I think, hang on a minute, let me get this out of the hole. So the end of that spring was absolutely destroyed, and it's supposed to be pushing up on this. So we found a problem. Luckily for us, I have a tub of itsy bitsy springs. All right, so we dug that out, dug all the mung out of it. Here, let me get that in profile there. You can see now that that's actually free to move, and that's what it should be. All this garbage here on the table was just gack that I dug off. There was a lot more. So what's left here, we've got everything back out of the soup. And what's left here is to just oil all this down. Now what I'm using is just straight up Briggs & Stratton lawnmower engine oil. And what makes that stuff useful, you don't have to have that, but it's cheap. Here, hey, guys in Australia, don't send away to the United States for oil that came from China, like we did with the toilet bowl rings. Don't do that. Please don't do that. Get some cheap oil that's non-detergent. We just spent a lot of time, setting the finish up on this thing, and what we don't want to do is put an oil on it whose sole function in life is to remove rust. So that slide's looking pretty good. We dug all that out. That's just a straight up conservation. I've got entire videos about how to do it. But all I'm doing here is just oiling down this entire gun. And then once you're done with this, you can use a regular gun oil. But we just don't want to have done. See, I just got an old olive jar here with a little bit of oil on the bottom of it, and dig it out and go. Right now is a good time to check to see if this mag is free to move. And then just like on a 1911, every time we do something, every time we add a part that screws in or near the mag well, we want to make sure that this is still free to move so that we find that. All right, back to oiling. So unlike a 1911, I'm not putting this thing together with raw muscle memory. So there's a little plunger here. And what we're going to do, bring this around to about where this ought to go. Tuck this plunger up in. And that should, there it is. Now that plunger was jammed. I mean, it took some major effort to get it apart because it had been just filled up full of rust. So we're running into some things that were possibly wrong with this before we got here. Next thing I'm guessing is the firing pin. That should go in there. Now, if I get this out of sequence, I'm winging it. And I'm going to tell you straight up I'm winging it. Because I don't really know. And to be really honest, some of the videos out there about guys doing this are not really that far up there for me. Okay, so that's in. And then I believe the next thing that goes in is this loaded chamber indicator pin. That's loaded chamber. That has to go under this. And the reason why I know that has to go under this, and that spring has got to go up on top, and that should sit right in there. All right, there it is. So that sits on top. So when there's something sitting in the chamber, there's a pin that sticks out back here that's very tactile that you can feel it. So the reason why I know all that is because I took a picture of this on my phone. And yeah, I understand that my screensaver is destroyed, but I know what I'm looking at because I've got a photograph of it. All right. And believe me, I've actually used that in order to attempt to deduct this. So that's up in there. And then I believe this plunger comes up from underneath. And I believe that this plunger comes down from up above. And that is in accordance with, the photograph that I took before. So what we just learned from my photograph is that this locking plunger is coming down from above like this. And I might have to, nope, there it is. So we've assembled all this based on what we had before, and it was real easy because of it. I think the only thing that's left here is going to be the the extractor, and the extractor plunger. Extractor plunger spring is going to float up inside a hole there. And then the hook part's going to go forward, so we just stuff all that in that hole. And there we go. We got ejector issues. Note that this gun extracts and ejects, and the rounds go to the left. It's different than anything you've ever seen before. It's crazy. Yeah. There it is. And by the miracle of modern science, it goes in. There was a lot of goofing around here. This has to snap to the back to hold the rear sight on, and then there's a set of hooks that go under and down. You'll do this much futzing around with something when you're trying to put it back together. But there, I think we got it all. Now, there's a couple of deals going on up in here. Give me a refocus, bro, right here. There's a plunger in here that unlocks the trigger, or unlocks the firing pin. And I really am kind of at a loss for what that plunger does, other than being something that'll hold the rear sight in place laterally this way. So that's what's happening. And there's a lever that's going to lift up on this when you have the trigger pulled, so that if you drop the gun and your finger's not on the trigger, it won't go off. By the way, this is probably half of the Ruger automatics, most of the Glocks, everything. Trust me, Walther got there first. I seriously do not remember what order I put this in, so when you don't know what order you're going in, there's this little spring plunger gizzy that goes up here. Hang on a minute. Very difficult to show this, but this goes in that hole right there and gets pushed back. We got to make sure that that plunger is free to move in that hole, and it is. And now there's a hole drilled in from the top. And the reason why that hole's in there is that I can push this plunger back in, trap it down, and then put the takedown lever in. So now somewhere on this table there's a takedown lever. So I can take the takedown lever. You see the detent there? And then there's another detent over there. So if we run this in where this is flat, we should be able to get all the way in and then have that be spring loaded there and spring loaded there. Okay, so what I'm trying to do now is get the number of things on the bench down so we can begin to account for everything. These are easy ones. Spring, right? And then as we learned before, we can retract the spring, set that pin in there so we're not bending anything, let that run over, and now that's captured and will not come out. That's actually brilliant. That was done well. So the trigger is going to go through here and be spring loaded, and we learned that. That's just going to spear through that center hole, pop up through there, and now the trigger's in. And it actually makes a tremendous amount of sense. Now, if we don't remember which way this spring went in, and that's what's going to push up on this, all we have to do now is go back to our trusty phone. All right, I got this figured out. There's a hole right there that's supposed to go in so that it's captured. That snaps over there, and then that's going to go up there like that. So now these are both tension. All right, now that makes a lot more sense. In my photograph of it, the tattletale was actually right there. The end of that spring sticking up is the end of that spring sticking up right there. So everything is closed. It's also giving you a pretty good before and after on just how gacked up the inside of this thing was. I mean, yeah, zooks, right? All right, so this is an interlock, and we knew that because on the bottom of the slide here, it's got to pick up that plunger. That plunger is over here, and then this is the bar that interacts with the safety. So when you're putting the safety on and off, that's going to kick this thing in and out. So that's the arrangement of them. And what we got to try to do now is get this hammer down in here, have one of those on one side, the other one on the other side. So we will begin with a loose confederation of assembly pins. we'll bring that through and just hang that in there. And then we'll bring the hammer through and kind of hang it in there. So this has to be up in front. There we go. Hang on now, I'll get my hands out of the way and show you what I did. But all I'm doing now is just kind of getting everything speared on this punch. All right, and then we can look through the hole here and see how close we are. And we notice that we want this bar up on top of that so that that falls over. So right now I got that going on. I got a punch sticking through right here, holding that one interlock. And then I've got this other interlock, and I can slide that down in here like this, knowing that as I pull this punch out just enough to let that slip into that slot there, that will go down and the punch will grab it. So now I have that interlock bar picked up. I've got the hammer. I've got the sear spring loaded up against it. And then I can just chase this pin out with the regulation pin and I'll have it all. And take that in there. Did I lose that? I lose this? No, I didn't. I almost lost that one though. All right, there we go. That's working. You just keep walking it around until bang, you got them all in there. All right. Now, I'm going to flip around here and we're going to connect the transfer bar to this. And we can come around the corner here and just slip that in there. Now, is there a possibility I just screwed myself in the assembly order? There is. And in fact, I did. And I'm pretty sure I did. So, you got to take it all the way apart? No. You might be able to get away with dropping this. All right, so we blend back out. Here's what had to happen. The transfer bar had to kind of hook around the corner, then plug in. Now we got to go put all this gack back together again and go find that sweet spot right there. Right there. That's got to go up in there like that. Now, I put the pin in from the other side, and it just made more sense. Here we go. That's got to be up there, and that's got to be there. So now, I've got it all in here. So now the wisdom for not having screwed with this spring is going to become immediately evident. Again, another blend. What I had to do was bend the hook on the bottom of this spring and take a little bit out of this. This spring is, I think it's hand wound by somebody, but it's doing its job of pushing upwards on this bar so that as this thing comes into half cock right there, and then full cock actually, see when you lift that, it'll come forward and clear that out of the way. And then in double action, that little double action pawl that we fixed will snap in the way. You can see it there. And then this will grab it as it drives around the corner, bang. Now the other important thing to note is when we pull this trigger, this sticks up. Okay? So when we got our finger off the trigger, that's down. But as we're pulling backwards, that pops up. And what that says is the firing pin is not allowed to access the primer unless you got your finger on the trigger. All right? So that's actually a good thing. Now, the safety will push down on this lever. And when the safety pushes down on this lever, it neuters the firing train until you lift that back up again, at which time it will allow the hammer to fall. We're doing all of this without the mainspring in this thing because the last thing you want is all that energy out of that mainspring to be arrested by whatever the hell's underneath this hammer. You drop this hammer under mainspring effort, you will break something, and that goes to every gun you ever work on, especially ARs and 1911s. Don't be dropping those hammers without somewhere for the energy to go. The hammer strut was missing, so this was part of that. And that goes up in underneath the hammer there. And you'll feel it when it's in the right spot. And then that, I think, just snaps in there. And that gives you the, here we go. That's what holds the mag in and what holds everything at full cock here. So let me come off and make sure. Again, we don't want to release this energy inside this spring without it having somewhere to go. There we go. So we exercise it a few times. Boom, and it's moving up and down. And again, we check fit with the mag just to make sure the mag will go in and out of this thing, right? And you pop that up. Easier said than done. There we go. We pop that up and then mag comes right out. Okay, so we've got everything here. So what's left to do now is put the barrel back on it. All right, the way this gun locks together is this tab right here. So when you push there, it unlocks, and then it locks up inside that recess. So the whole thing slides on. Now this doesn't, there are a lot of interrelationships here that I don't get. That's got to get kicked down, and that's why that's hinged, so you can get that thing out of the way. And then do we have a, does that have to be pushed in? Yeah, that's got to be up. All right, there we go. You kick that back around, right? There it is. So in a lock breech system, the barrel and slide proceed to the rear. Then the barrel unlocks and the slide goes the rest of the way back, just like in 1911. Done differently, but just like in 1911. Bred in 92F, whatever the heck you want to call this. So we're there, and we'll just do a couple of really simple checks here and see whether or not, okay, so that's safe. You can come back up in double action, right? That's safe, it doesn't work. You can do that, that just drops the hammer down. Okay, that's their system. Again, you know, just because you think you know what you're doing doesn't mean you do. I don't know the manual arms on this gun any more than anybody else does. We're getting ready to take this thing outside, and we did the final bench checks. And that spring doesn't even have enough strength to keep this gun shut, and I suspect that it might have been open during the fire that melted the grips and drew the temper on already marginal springs. The spring that I thought was going to give us away, this mag, fine. This thing is great. I had 2 rounds in it. I had more rounds so we could do the disconnector checks and everything. This safety detent locked up too. That's supposed to snap, and it's not. So there's some more work that's got to be done. But now that we've got all the gack off of it and we've got it properly lubricated, we could make those decisions. His mind is strong, but his skills are weak. Wait a minute. A new pack of Wolf mainsprings has just appeared in the mail. Well, it's time to go bid an old friend goodbye, shall we? 30 years ago, 2 years before my oldest daughter was born, I bought a piece of equipment a long time ago, and I'm going to tell you, I've gotten my use out of it, but ammo's expensive, so we're just going to have to get this over with and just hope he doesn't feel any pain. Well, guys, Walther P38. We've scraped off the plastic. We got her running again, and as always, it's been a pleasure.